Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm looking at some US politics, in particular the appointment process for the Supreme Court. This is part of my series on US politics and also part of my wider playlist on A-level politics, where I'm aiming to cover the entire spec as I teach it. So this is part of the edXL A-level specification, so it's component 3A and section 4.2, the appointment process for the Supreme Court. Strengths and weaknesses of the process, factors influencing the President's choice of nominee, the current composition and ideological balance of the court. So I'm going to look at all of those different bits. It's been something that's been a kind of a highly controversial issue over recent years. The court has shifted quite dramatically, particularly because of the fact that Donald Trump managed to make 3 appointments, and that fundamentally changed the balance of the court. So how it works in the most basic ways? Well, essentially, first of all, you need a vacancy. So this might be caused by, sadly, by the death of one of the Chief Justices, and that happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 2020. It could be due to a resignation or retirement, and we had retirement of Kennedy in 2018. Or it could be due to the impeachment of a justice. Now, it's very important to remember that a justice has a life tenure, so that they're given the job for life, and this means that it's only in those circumstances does a president get to add another judge. Also important, that's going all the way back to just after the American Civil War. The number of justices has been set at 9. Now, that's not, I don't believe in absolute concrete in the Constitution. Well, it's not in the Constitution. It was changed just after the Civil War. And so that could alter going forward, but it's been 9 for a very long time. And I think there would be a big kickback if that was attempted to change that. So once there's a vacancy, then the President, with support of the White House official, draws up a shortlist of people they're going to consider to nominate. There's full scrutiny of that shortlist, including interviews with the President, or a full FBI background checks, and the President will then make their decision on who they're going to nominate. That nomination is then pushed forward to the Senate, and there's a variety of things that then happen before Senate approval is given. So the Senate Judicial Committee will hold hearings, interview the nominee, and then the Judicial Committee as a body will vote. And essentially, unless you get the support of the Judicial Committee, your chances are fairly slim. The American Bar Association also issues a report on the potential new justice, and they give them one of three ratings: either not qualified, qualified, or well qualified. On the current bench, we've got 8 who received the judgment of well qualified, and 1 Thomas who received the judgment of qualified. And once you've had the Bar Association report and the meetings in the Judicial Committee, the nomination then goes to a full Senate vote, and you need over 50% of the vote to get nominated. So it can be a really difficult process. If you go back in time, then you used to get nominees going through with huge majorities, almost no opposition. Nowadays, things have become incredibly partisan, and that's part of the story of the growing controversy, really, surrounding Supreme Court justices' appointments. Now, one of the big issues with the court, and one of the things that actually, if you read articles about it and you follow the news relating to the Supreme Court, one of the things that you'll most commonly hear referred to is this idea of conservative versus liberal. This is almost really becoming shorthand for Republican and Democrat, but not quite. Now, a conservative justice tend to favour authority, criminal legal authority over civil rights, and particularly civil rights based on race and sexual orientation, whilst favouring capital punishment, and also favouring key conservative rights, such as the right to bear arms and opposition to abortion. Now, they often in favour of states' rights over federal power, and they tend to take what's known as a strict constructionist view of the Constitution. So they're kind of taking it literally, or as they believe the Founding Fathers meant it, often referred to as being originalists when it comes to the interpretation of the Constitution. Now, the conservative justices are associated with the Republican Party in that it tends to be Republican presidents that nominate them. And their ideas on things like the right to bear arms and abortion and things like religious rights tend to fit more with the kind of Republican base, the Republican voters in general. The other side of that coin is you'll hear of liberal justices, and they tend to favour civil rights, in particular in relation to race and sexual orientation and a woman's right to choose. They tend to support criminal justice reform, and see there have been some problems with criminal justice in the States. They tend to support gun control and oppose capital punishment. They often favour federal power over state power, particularly where they see state power impacting on things like voter registration, things like that. And they tend to take a kind of a more loose constructionist view of the Constitution, often referred to as the idea of a living Constitution, where it's part of the judge's role to update the interpretation of the Constitution to make sure that it is relevant and living and fits with the world that they're in at that moment in time. And liberal justices tend to be appointed by Democrat presidents. Key thing with all of that is although they might perceive them to be conservative or liberal at the point they're appointed, the fact that they then have life tenure and they can't be taken, they can't be removed, means that actually at that point the presidential control over them ends. And this is particularly seen in recent times with Trump, who made 3 appointments, and there is a largely conservative court, felt that he would get the court's support when it came to his claims on election fraud, but he didn't, and that kind of, again, illustrating a bit of the independence of the judiciary. And the strength, one is independence. So life tenure and separation of powers means that once appointed, justice is under no obligation to do what any president or party wants them to do. They're also not bound by public opinion, as they're not elected. And so it should mean that they are doing an independent job which is based on interpreting the Constitution and doing what is right based on their legal expertise. The process of appointment should also ensure that you get people with judicial ability, that you are appointing qualified and expert justices. The fact that you have the president and the executive branch involved, you have the Senate involved, including experts on the Judicial Committee. I mean, one of the things that the second impeachment of Trump illustrated recently was just quite how many members of Congress have a legal background. And then also there is this really key report from the American Bar Association. All that involvement in the process should mean that you end up with very well qualified justices taking to the bench, and therefore you have people with the judicial ability to do the job. The other part of this is personal suitability, and the process should ensure that as well, because we've got the FBI screening and all the scrutiny going into their background. The FBI do it. Obviously, all the media are going to do it as well. As soon as they hear of someone as a potential nominee, they are interviewed by the president and their staff. They are interviewed by the Judicial Committee in the Senate. So any kind of historical issues or character flaws should be exposed. Now that we have seen some controversies on this, the most recent one was Kavanaugh, whose point was highly controversial because of some sexual misconduct claims against him. There are, of course, also weaknesses to the process. So the big bit on this is the nomination and ratification has been highly politicised. So the political leanings of the President and the Senate have become increasingly key in the process. So Republicans, as I mentioned earlier, support conservative justices, Democrats support liberal ones, and this is going to be really highlighted as we go through the current members of the court. And you'll see the liberal ones are all appointed by Democrat presidents, and the conservative ones are all appointed by Republican ones. One of the most controversial kind of parts of the politicisation of it is the refusal of the Republican Senate to appoint Merrick Garland in the final year of Obama's term in office, arguing that essentially it was too late on in his term and therefore it was an inappropriate moment to make an appointment and this should be made by the new president coming in. And then they went completely against their previous arguments 4 years later, where they happily confirmed the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, despite the fact that it was much later in Trump's term. And again, this looked like hypocrisy, and also it looked very much like this is a highly politicized moment in terms of the court. I mean, even retirements tend to be timed to fit with the matching president. So if you've got a conservative justice, then they're more likely to choose to retire when you're in the early part of a term of a Republican president. If you've got a liberal justice, they're likely to try and hold on and wait for the next Democrat to be in the White House before they retire. So all of this highlights that this is a kind of key political issue. It probably was one of the biggest political issues pushing behind Trump, actually, was the desire of kind of conservative America to have a conservative court, and therefore they needed a Republican president. Now, one of the odd bits, this seems like a strange kind of combination to put together, because this seems like the other side of the argument that argues, well, actually, because it's been so politicized, then actually you don't get genuine interviews or genuine answers out of nominees in the process. So if we go back in time a bit, there was a nominee called Bork in 1987, and he answered all the questions about his views on abortion and things like that, and that then led to him not getting through because of the reaction of the Democrats in the Senate. So recent nominees such as Gorsuch have refused publicly to be drawn on key issues before their appointment, and that seems to make the process ineffective because the Senate doesn't really get a full idea of how this particular individual views key issues in American politics. So the first weakness is about over-politicization, and then the second one kind of links to that, but it's kind of almost the other side, which is saying that you aren't actually getting the full truth before appointments are made. So what makes a president decide to nominate a particular person? Well, there are a number of factors that influence the president's choice of nominee. The first is their judicial ability. Are they well qualified? And that can mainly come from experience in one of the lower courts, such as the Circuit Court, which is one level below the Supreme Court. And those Circuit Courts tend to be the place where most of the Supreme Court justices come from. There are some exceptions. Kagan is one. Now, her background was more in legal academia, and that can be seen as an alternative route, because you're going to want people who are real scholars in terms of their understanding of the Constitution. There was some criticism of her appointment because she hadn't kind of got that kind of years of built-in experience working in the circuit courts, but again, arguably the academic background is just as significant, just as viable an alternative. The demographics of the court and of America can also be a key part in this. So notably, Bush, when he was replacing the first ever black justice on the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, replacing with the second, Clarence Thomas, who's still on the court today. Obama looked to make the court more reflective of America by replacing 2 white men with 2 women, including the first ever Hispanic justice, Sotomayor, and so in that we can see the court starting to reflect the demographics of the country a little bit better. Trump, when replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, replaced her with Amy Coney Barrett, so maintaining the female representation on the court. But obviously, the views of those two justices are radically different. Ideological is obviously a really key part. You are likely to get highly conservative judges from a Republican president and liberal ones from a Democrat one. However, there are political influences that can affect this. So first of all, is the Senate hostile or friendly? So if you've got a hostile Senate, so for example, if you've got a Democrat president and a Republican Senate, then they're likely to go on the moderate side. And the same would be said if you've got a Republican president and a Democrat Senate, then the Republican president is going to have to go more moderate in terms of their nominee if they're going to get it through. If you've got a friendly Senate, then you've got a highly conservative president, you can get highly conservative, and a highly conservative Senate, you can get highly conservative justices, or vice versa. Now, it can be seen as being political moves in terms of appealing to voting groups. So the appointment of Sotomayor increased Obama's share of the Hispanic vote. Now, whether that's why he did it is highly debatable, but that is definitely a side effect it had on it. Trump it can be argued, used his nominations to shore up his support from the evangelical right, who might have issues with some of his behaviour and some things he says, but in terms of his appointments to the Supreme Court, again, particularly getting in the Amy Coney Barrett one in right at the end, was seen as an attempt by Trump to kind of secure that part of the vote. Now, the current composition of the court and ideological balance of the court, well, essentially it splits 6-3 in favour of the Conservatives at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the different justices. I'm going to get very briefly on this bit, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on them in the upcoming bit of the video. So, Clarence Thomas was appointed by Bush Senior. He is a renowned conservative. Stephen Breyer was appointed by Clinton and is liberal. John Roberts, who's now the Chief Justice, and Samuel Alito were both appointed by Bush Jr. They're both conservative. Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan were both appointed by Obama and are both liberal. Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett are all appointed by Trump. All are conservatives. And this is where the balance of the court changed. Because Kavanaugh replaced Kennedy, and Kennedy was seen as the moderate, the swing vote on the court, and Kavanaugh is now conservative. And then with Amy Coney Barrett, who is highly conservative, we believe is going to prove to be highly conservative, replacing the leading liberal light in Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This significantly altered the makeup of the court, and this is definitely one area where Trump's legacy is going to be seen for a significant length of time. So Clarence Thomas, appointed by George Bush Senior, he replaced Thurgood Marshall. Thomas is conservative justice, whilst Marshall was liberal. So there was an area of kind of demographic continuity, but a significant shift in ideology. So he is a strict religionist, considered probably the most conservative member of the court. Obviously, we've not quite had a huge length of time with the 3 Trump appointments as of yet. He's the only justice to receive a qualified rather than well qualified from the American Bar Association. He was confirmed in a 52-48 vote, which shows it was highly contentious at the time, and there were sexual harassment claims raised against him during the nomination process. Stephen Breyer was appointed by Clinton, is on the liberal side of the court. He was confirmed 87-9, and this again is probably one of the last ones that we've seen with a huge vote in favour of their nomination. He stands against the originalist ideas. He is a liberal, and it looks more at the idea of the living constitution. He's seen as pro-abortion and anti-death penalty. In terms of our next stage, then, so we've then got John Roberts, who is the Chief Justice. So you will often see the current court referred to as the Roberts Court. He was he was appointed by George W. Bush. He is a moderate conservative justice. His philosophy doesn't seem to be fully fixed. He would be if the court was 5-4. He would really be the pivot of the court. And the court under Roberts, the Roberts court, has seen a tendency towards more conservative ruling, notably on gun laws with DC versus Heller in 2008, on voting rights with Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. However, NFIB versus Sebelius in 2012 on the Affordable Care Act suggested some kind of moderate, even potential gentle liberal leanings from the court. Samuel Alito was appointed by George W. Bush. He is seen as being very strongly conservative in line with Thomas, and again he's another originalist. He was appointed in the vote of 58-42 in favour of the Senate. Notable, there was however some notable objections from the American Civil Liberties Union. Democrats had earlier blocked the nomination of Harriet Miers based on her lack of experience. Now, she would have been a far more moderate judge than Alito, far less conservative, so arguably that was a poor political move by the Democrats. So the justice appointed under Obama. So we've got Sonia Sotomayor, appointed by Obama, the first Hispanic justice to serve on the Supreme Court. So she is a key liberal member of the bench, a key advocate of criminal justice reform, and is seen as being pro-choice. The Senate voted 68-31 in favour of her nomination. There was some controversy at the time of her nomination over a statement she made about a wise Latina woman maybe being better placed to make judgments than a white male, and that caused a degree of controversy at the time. Elena Kagan was appointed by Obama. She has a more of an academic background rather than being active in case law. She was nominated, her nomination vote was 63-37 in the Senate, and she's part of the Liberal bloc as well, particularly working closely with Breyer. They tend to vote as a pair almost. So we saw a liberalisation to a degree of the court under Obama, but he was largely replacing liberal justices with liberal justices. Now, things then changed dramatically under Trump, and so these are the three Trump nominations. So we've got Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by Trump, nominated 54-45 in the Senate. Democrats attempted to filibuster in response to the Republicans having blocked Garland's nomination. This all feeds into the politicisation bit. He was 49 when nominated, and so he was the youngest entrant to the court since Thomas. He's conservative and originalist, but he did support LGBTQ plus rights in 2020, on suggesting they should have the same protection that is given on the basis of sex, because you would act differently towards people if they were doing the same actions but they were the opposite sex. So we've seen that appointment. It was controversial largely because of the context in terms of following what had happened before, and we can see again the vote's fairly close. The Senate had to take what's known as the nuclear option to stop the filibuster, which would have been used to kind of prevent the nomination. Brett Kavanaugh was appointed by Trump. The vote on him was 50-48. This is one of the closest ever in terms of someone getting appointed. And it was highly controversial due to sexual misconduct allegations which were raised at the time. He is seen as being a highly conservative justice and seen as being very strongly pro-life. The final most recent nomination is that of Amy Coney Barrett, again by Trump. She's seen as being conservative and originalist. Again, it was a highly controversial appointment because it was right at the end of Trump's term in office, with the Republicans in the Senate acting in complete opposite way to their arguments over Merrick Garland that they'd given, that stopping his appointment at the end of Obama's term. And the vote was 52-48, and again, so that is close. One of the things that makes it stand out is that there's not a single vote for the Democrats for Amy Coney Barrett, and that's the first time since 1870 that any nominee has received no votes from the opposing party. So again, we can see a highly controversial moment in there. I hope that's been helpful for you and answered all the key bits that the specification asks for, and giving you a good understanding of the appointment process to the Senate, and in particular giving you a decent understanding of the different strands in the court and the balance of the court at the moment. It's likely to be something that you'll be able to easily pick up further details on. Just keep a close eye on the news, and the Supreme Court, whenever it acts, that will be a news story, and you'll be able to then hopefully pick out some more examples to reflect the theory and stuff that I've gone through on there. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, then please hit like. If you are interested in more videos along this line and you haven't done so already, then please subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll get notified as I add more videos. And any questions or queries, please leave it in the comment section. Thank you very much.